Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
It is I, the one, the only.
It's like 10 minutes of the podcast I was like, damn, done podcasting now. So anyway, you guys ready to go and get started?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
The Comics Kid 2099.
And the Geek for Fun.
Indeed. Today we're doing a bit of a departure from our normal format because I just decided to be, selfish, and hijack everyone's choices for the thing I want to review. So really what I want to do is I want to review the entirety of the Batman War Games crossover. But I also don't want to have to read it in a week, and I don't think anyone else does either. So yeah, instead we're gonna just hijack the next couple episodes of Geeky Gentlemen and do that. One episode, one volume. So we got War Drums, War Games X 1, 2, and 3, and War Crimes. That being said, the standard Sunday episode of Geeky Gentlemen is usually about an hour, give or take. Sometimes it can go longer, but it's been a while. I think this is going to be one of those times where it's going to be hard to talk about the volumes until we get to completion, so I'm really not going to hold us to an hour. We'll talk about War Drums and Act 1 and 2 and 3 and War Crimes as thoroughly as we can within their own context, and we'll talk about the larger story arc as needed. But I don't really feel the need to try to stretch to fill an hour, because this conceivably could all be uploaded as one episode by the time we're done. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Is that kosher with everyone? Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
So,
All right, so let me start by asking, who here had read War Games, War Drums before?
I had.
Okay, all right. So we all had experience. This is nobody's first time. Does anyone actually have any fond memories of War Games as a whole and War Drums in particular?
No.
well, I kind of got them all when I was in a big Batman fix. And I said, alright, I'm going to start getting loads of Batman trade paperbacks. And I, round about when I started coming, they had 2 volumes of this, which collected all of that. So actually with the War Drums things, I actually had to look up what issues the old trade was that was War Drums, because my page, in book 1, it just collects all of that, and I think Act 1 as well.
Okay.
So when I collected all of them in my Batman thing, I just read through all of that all the way up to New 52 with Morrison's run and then incorporated. And yeah, this wasn't the highlight of that run, to be sure.
That's totally fair. Yeah, see, War Games is actually from my favorite era of Batman comics, and I guess generally comics. I really like a lot of what was going on in the early 2000s, but in particular, I like it for Batman because of what would come after. And I just find that really interesting. We'll talk about that more as we go into this series. But War Drums just does some stuff that, we don't really see it anymore. This was when we were trying to do more grounded, street-level Batman who's still, Batman. And he's in the DC universe. And so, we got, the first proper story arc that starts this off is just... It's so fucking bleak, and I love it because of how bleak it is. The surrogate story arc. And I also really love the opening issue because this was when Jason Todd was actually dead, and there weren't any immediate plans to bring him back. And so it was just like, this really somber thing about like the cost of this life kind of thing. And so I really liked that opening story arc or opening issue and just the bleakness and sadness of the story arc. What did you guys think of just how this all starts off?
I think that issue that you're talking about where he's kind of mad because this is the day that Jason died like so many years ago. I think that would have worked better if we didn't, in this same volume, see him adopting Stephanie Brown into the Robin family. Like, Batman is a horrible person in this book. Like, he is the worst. And I'm a huge Batman fan, but he is just a turd in this whole story. And, like, you asked if we had any fond memories, and, like, I read the whole War saga a long time ago. I remember not liking it, but I didn't remember why. And like going into this one, there's a lot that I did not remember. Like almost all of the stuff that's in Detective Comics, I did not remember any of that. I remembered some of the stuff in the Robin stuff where the art is very cartoony. I remembered some of that more, but a lot of this was very new to me. And by itself, it's not bad, but knowing what comes later, it leaves a real bad taste in my mouth.
Okay, and we'll hold off on that stuff until we get to it, but yeah, I think that is like the biggest contradiction is it starts off with this very like somber kind of, this is what this life can lead to, and some of us are too deep in it to ever leave, but Stephanie Brown, she could still get out, she could still survive this and have this just be that crazy thing she did as a teenager. And then like he does a complete fucking heel turn by the time you get to like the middle of the thing, and she just shows up in the Batcave dressed as Robin, who's like, well, I guess I tried my best, she's Robin now. That's just, Alfred, just look at that determination. I tried to get her to stop, but she showed up to the Batcave dressed as Robin, so she's Robin. And like, I don't know, I have varying thoughts on it. On one level, it is most certainly a ridiculous heel turn, and just it's stupid. It's like the person that wrote that arc or wrote that justification clearly didn't read the issue that this started with. But then you put it in the context, and I don't feel it's like too big a spoiler to talk about what happens further down the line, because War Games is infamously or not infamously the arc that killed Stephanie Brown. That was like the big thing about it that like led to consequences and the cost of it all. This is the story arc where Stephanie Brown dies, and she was kind of a beloved part of the Bat family for a number of years before this. And so like I completely agree that I don't think it's particularly well written, and it comes off as giving you a bit of whiplash. But you put it into the context, and you begin to see like Batman's optimism coming back in a certain way, and you just see him get punished for that, and I really, really like that. Alfie, what did you think of the Whiplash Robin reveal here?
Well, I feel like I noticed this so heavily when I was reading it, and I feel like the beginning and the end of Stephanie Brown's Robin career, specifically in War Drums, like when we end this with Bruce like firing her, those two moments and those two like specifically like those issues regarding her are the flimsiest, most random. Like Bruce decides that, yeah, okay, you're hired. Oh, okay, you're fired. Like it's very so quickly, but the stuff in the middle with her as Robin is kind of enjoyable. And it kind of confuses me a little bit, because I like the stuff with like Robin always, especially with Bruce, he or she works to kind of like lighten the mood, give Batman something to talk to, have this kind of like insight into Batman's world you normally wouldn't have as a reader, because he has to then sit down and explain how he does things. And then that makes it even more cool, because you get to see scenes where he's like teaching Stephanie how to do what he's done. And it's really cool, because you don't really get that kind of insight into, okay, if we're trying to be practical about this, how do you learn Batman? So I like that stuff. But yeah, it Bruce's character in this is just so random, and it's like it's trying to be Frank Miller Batman, but also not, because he starts off mourning Jason, going on a dark path where like Leslie Thompkins like freaking out about him, and like he seems to be getting more brutal. Like Cassandra Cain's like, you're not normally like this, and like in the opening of this trailer, they even said shortly have to hush. Bruce is still rattled, but then he kind of suddenly becomes like more like you say, and he gets his hope back. And I don't see anything like justified why. If anything, he should be more cynical and more against Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe the story here should have been Stephanie tries to be Robin despite him continuously trying to stop her, and then he goes too far trying to stop her, and maybe that's what leads to like her tragic fate. And then that's a lesson he has to learn, is he can't be so overprotective, because he'll just end up like Jason when he was not as protective.
Okay, I'm going to say I think that's what happens. To be fair, I haven't read War Games in a long time. I think that's basically what happens is she continues to go out as spoiler. And like that's the thing, is he tells her that she's done as Robin because they had a deal and she broke it. So I actually don't think that he's being unfair there. I think he is, you look at like her introduction as Robin, the girl wonder, and it's very clear. It's laid out just directly. Let's get one thing straight. You're on probation, and as long as that's in effect, you don't learn any of the big secrets. Check. And the first time you disobey my orders, even in a minor way, is the precise moment you're out. No second chances. Double check. Like, he's very, very clear, very, very stern. I don't think he's unfair when he's like, okay, you disobeyed an order? I don't care what it was for. You disobeyed an order. You're fired.
She does it in the Zaz issue, and that's what I don't like, is because he ignores that.
When does she ignore an order in the Zaz issue?
When I think it's during the fight, again, a bit hazy from when but like she gets in the exact same position in the fight where he's got the knife against her thing because she was going off road, and then she almost kills Zaz, and you think that would be the thing Bruce would like freak out about, but he's pretty okay with that. Whereas Robin getting kidnapped, which has happened all the time to every Robin, like in a bad situation, like you want to count how many times Dick Grayson's been in peril because of something. Like, I don't really buy it.
Maybe. I'm trying to like find the dialogue in particular. Does he give her an order that she disobeys during the Zaz fight? I need to see if that actually happens.
He doesn't give. He tells her, all right, now's the part where you leave. Like Zaz is somewhere in the subway. You need to leave, and she kind of resists, but then she's like, oh, okay, and then she goes to leave. And then Zaz has doubled back, and he kidnaps Stephanie, and then. But that's not the part that Alfie is having a problem with, I think, is that she does something, bends his nose backwards, and Bruce says, if his nose hadn't been broken, you would have killed him straight up, and we don't do that. And she's like, oh, I don't think so. I'm just, I'm cool and awesome, and I get to do whatever I want. And then he's like, nope, you're not fired yet. And so I agree with Alfie on that one. Like that, it's weirdly, like, with Batman's no-killing rule being like a huge constant for him, the fact that she very nearly broke it and would have if his nose wasn't broken, and then Batman seems to be okay with her continuing Robin, that is a little weird.
I mean, it's weird, but it doesn't violate the deal, is what I'm getting at.
Sure.
It's very direct in his rules, and I've read a lot of Batman stories, and I think he's come a lot closer to killing people than she did with Zaz. Like I'll throw that one out there. And Batman's the ultimate hypocrite, which is the funny thing. Like, I remember the Marvel DC crossover, like he tells everyone, all right, we don't know the rules here, so we're gonna explore this world, but we're not gonna get involved. Put your egos in check. I don't want to see anyone slipping up. And then they're just fucking going around, and Batman sees the Punisher killing a bunch of people and kicks the Punisher's ass, and Plastic Man just goes off on him for it. Batman's totally a hypocrite about those things. So the no kill rule or the she came close to killing thing, I actually don't think that is anywhere near enough to throw her out as Robin. Hell, shortly before this, kind of in continuity at the time, Dick Grayson had actually killed the Joker but they just revived him last minute. So I'll say I don't think that one is justifiable. I think the reasoning for her getting fired is actually fair. I think her getting hired is kind of ridiculous. I think you can fudge it. I think that's a fair way to put it. I think you can fudge her getting hired as Robin. As far as the like whether or not it works, I think you can fudge it. For her getting fired, I think I'm totally on board with it.
It reminds me of you mentioned Frank Miller earlier, Alfie, and like this is very much hitting all the beats of Carrie Kelly in The Dark Knight Returns. Like Carrie Kelly just kind of invites herself into Batman's life, and for some reason he just says, "Okay, cool." Like this total stranger he's never met before, yeah, you can be Robin. And then he tells her, if you disobey me once, you're fired. The difference is, for some reason, he keeps giving Carrie Kelly multiple chances. And I'll confess, I don't really care for Carrie Kelly. I don't really care for Stephanie either. But I at least like that here he is, I agree with you, Ian. He is fair with her. He gives her a chance and she blows it. And then I also agree with you. I think him hiring her, he's just a jerk here. Like he's not really a great person in this story.
No, and that's actually what I like about this. I mentioned it earlier that I really like this era of stuff because of what comes after it. I should give some history here. When I started reading comics, I walked out of Batman Begins, walked across a parking lot to a branch of my local library, and started reading Batman comics in trade. I don't remember what the first thing I picked up was. It was one of the big ones. It was probably like year one or some shit. War Games and No Man's Land were opposite order. No Man's Land and War Games were the first big arcs I ever read that were like these, multi-part events. And that era of Batman, I remember finding so weird because I just like it's so right wing. It's hard not to put it in just political context. Like I really like the opening story arc Surrogate, but like, yeah, Ruben, you're right. Batman's a fucking jerk in that. Like he has this line that I just fuck him, he's just a fucking dick. I gotta find it because it's at like so the wrong time. Okay. So it's when Leslie Thompkins, the pop star, and the dying woman who has the baby and Batman are trapped in like the collapsed building, and Batman's like, "Please, you're a cliche. Young girl from the ghetto with dreams of bigger things starts running with the wrong crowd. Stop me when I'm wrong. Gets herself in trouble, but she's too young. There are complications that leave her barren. The grandmother adopts the child as her own. While you run away, adopt a new identity, abandoning your mother and child for your ambitions." And I'm just like, fuck you, bro. Like, yeah, she was just torturing a guy, and she's shady as fuck and all this stuff, but like, man, fuck you, Bruce Wayne. You're a dick.
Yeah, Mr. Silver Spoon. Like, Jesus, who are you to judge?
Right? Like, I really like just how much of a dick Batman is here. And, like, it's hard not to view that in a very right-wing kind of fashion. And so you get that, and it's heavily Miller-inspired. I think you gotta understand, Dark Knight Returns came out in, what was it, 86? And yeah,
86.
Yeah, 86, and for like 20 fucking years we're just dealing with that. Yeah, you got 86 to 96, 2006 was when Grant Morrison starts writing. For 20 years, everyone is writing Batman like he's Frank Miller Batman. To the point where old Batman writers wrote hate letters to Frank Miller saying, "Fuck you, you destroyed our character." And so you get this, like, just this fucking asshole where all these, like, vaguely right-wing kind of, I remember in No Man's Land, he's like, he realizes that the people that stayed in Gotham under Scarface's territory were, like, the mentally deranged, the welfare recipients, and I'm like, oh fuck you, Batman. Just for those little right wing kind of shitting on people moments come in, and I really like what that becomes, what that turns into, because as soon as Morrison hops on, that all goes away in an instant, and it gets so fascinating as a deconstruction, because he, you know, I unlike, I guess, 99% of leftists I see on Twitter, I don't think I was always a good person. I know I had regressive views. I live in a fucking red state. You know, it's hard not to internalize some of that stuff, and it takes a certain level of consciousness. So to see Batman as having had those views, and to see him grow out of it when I started reading comics, was just this really fascinating thing for me. And so I really like this in spite of its problems, which is I know a really weird stance to have, but that's kind of where I'm at with the characterization of Batman here.
See, for me, you know, it's not that Batman is a dick. That's not the problem. I think Batman always is. And again, I'm a Batman fan, so I'm not dissing on the character, but generally, when he's a jerk, he's always right. If he's having an argument with somebody, usually Batman has a very valid point when he's arguing with someone, usually. Here in this book, he's a jerk, and I'm not on his side. Like when he's straight up using Stephanie to make Tim jealous. Like, that's clearly what he's doing.
See, I disagree with that one, honestly. That's one.
I mean, did you read the entire like 2-page spread where he's like berating her, saying like, "Oh, Tim could have done better than this. Why aren't you more like Tim?"
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
No,
like,
I gotcha. I think that, is it fair to say you could also read that as him trying to get under his skin to pull out every bit of potential she has?
Yeah, that's how I saw her when I read that. I didn't think he was like comparing her, because that's not like the kind of thing. Even this Batman doesn't really like compare people. He just knows that will push her because she's doing it to beat Tim.
Yeah, that's how I read it. Ruben, I totally see your interpretation. I think that's valid. I just didn't read it that way.
Yeah, and I could be wrong. If both of you are seeing it one way and then I'm seeing it another way, then I could just be the odd man out.
It is vague. I'll give you that. So
and I mean, like,
no, right
it's not like that's wrong to think, because everyone else is thinking that. Barbara talks about that. Tim talks about that. When Barbara sees
and Alfred.
And Alfred, yeah. When Barbara sees what Batman's doing with Stephanie Brown, he's like, "Really? You're just doing this to make Tim jealous?" And Batman straight says, "Tim's a civilian now. He doesn't factor into my plans." And I'm like, I'm not entirely sure if that's the case or not. Like, do you take him at his face value, or do you see this as a giant manipulation? It is definitely something that I like how vague it is, because the answer could be both. You know? The answer could be that he is trying to do things to motivate Stephanie, and he does legitimately believe Stephanie can be a great Robin. And maybe he's also trying to bring Tim back into the life. It's really hard to say. I don't know. When you take it in the context with the first issue, with the visiting of Jason Todd's grave, maybe he accepts that Stephanie does want to be in the life. Maybe he accepts that she is too far into it. I mean, her fucking dad was the Clue Master. She's part, like, from birth, she's part of the cape and cowl lifestyle. You know, maybe you could make the argument that his rationale is she's too far in to get out. Tim isn't.
But he's been doing it a lot longer than her, I guess, is where I would argue with that. Because, like, I don't know when exactly she was introduced, but he was introduced in, like, very late 80s. And I want to say she was introduced, like, mid-90s. So, like, even with comic book time being what it is, he's been doing it longer than her.
No, I agree. I'm just saying that, like, she... What is the line specifically that he uses in that first issue? Because I'm trying to think if it's... if it is too long or too deep. It might be too deep. Some of us are in too deep. Let's see here. Because it's too late for some of us. For some of us, there's no going back. So I think... oh, Ruben, can you mute your mic, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. There was just a lot of static coming through for some reason. The idea that some of us are in too deep. I guess that does lend itself to... It doesn't matter how long you're into it. It matters how much you're invested. And the fact that Tim retired to try to, have a family life, it's so weird to say that, given that he wants to spend time with his dad and his stepmom. But the fact that Tim retires for his family, maybe he is, maybe you can take the interpretation. And, I'll concede that might be too generous, but I think if you're willing to give it a little bit of credit, there's definitely an interpretation to see there. Alfie, what do you think about all this?
Well, I kind of want to draw back to Ruben's point, and also your point of how some people aren't just good people with your experience, and you see this as a good, the Batman's kind of history is a character arc, and this is part of that character arc, which I'm totally on board with, because that's how I like to see comic continuity. We try and it's all this tangled mess, but if you wink hard enough, you can make it into this actually beautiful tapestry of just mishaps. So I see where you're coming from there. But I feel the larger problem with this, especially being kind of detached from that era, because I didn't start investing into Batman. So what was current when I was going on was Scott Snyder, New 52. That was my introductory status quo to Batman, and then I went back and read the older stuff. So my Batman's always kind of more together than this, at least to an extent, because me and you, Ian, we have kind of more controversial thoughts on Snyder's Batman, but I feel the problem is with this and Frank Miller's Batman, and kind of just a conception people have is, for some reason, a lot of writers tend to think, okay, let's make this more grounded by making the main character a jerk. It's why people think Watchmen is realistic, despite Dr. Manhattan having a Marvel 60s superhero backstory and there being flying owl ships. It's why people think The Dark Knight Returns is this on-the-ground, boots-level Batman story, where there's a nuclear winter where he fights Superman in his cheap mech suit. These stories aren't realistic. It's just because, okay, if we strip down Batman, wealthy guy with traumatic past, dresses as a band, beats up the poor. That's the kind of what a lot of non-comic fans kind of use against Batman, or this kind of non-Batman fan perception is, yeah, if he was in real life, he'd probably need mental help. He'd be kind of an asshole. He would be this kind of controlling, manipulative character, because he'd have to be in order to do so much, and just in terms of what we see. But I feel if you're gonna make the conceit with superheroes anyway, you can tell a realistic story, and you can do this on the ground Batman story, this kind of where he's having to deal with the Hill, which is a part of Gotham which Batman doesn't really go to because it's more urban, and he's out of his element because they're not scared of this white guy. It was I think Edward Hill did a really good, Brian Edward Hill did a really good story. I think he's the one who came up with this location. But Batman doesn't have to be an asshole to justify this, and I feel this story would be stronger if it wasn't this Batman. If it was a more together Batman who considered as lost with Jason, I'd buy his hope in Stephanie more, and then I'd feel more impact on the eventual loss. This Batman's meant to be more hardened. This Batman is kind of more manipulative, to the point where you can question, is he doing this just as a bite back against him? To the point where he is kind of zealously torturing Mr. Freeze in a way he doesn't really need to, where he is breaking more bones than possibly needed, and causing more hospital damage that he'll have to pay out with the Wayne Foundation. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but I just feel this characterization of Batman before Morrison but after Miller, it just kind of influences a lot of people's views on the character, which made me sad because it's not what I like in the character. It's not what I find fascinating about Bruce Wayne. Is this kind of like Punisher who doesn't kill, and that's not my Batman.
I think that's totally fair. I totally see where that comes from, and I think that's just that difference in when you what was the thing that you started with, and yeah, I totally see where you're coming from with that. I don't know, it's hard to make an argument for it. I really like this arc, this whole saga. And so I'm willing to give it a lot more credit than I feel other people are. I see reviews of this, and, you know, most people I don't think have flattering things to say about War Games. I don't think it's the greatest Batman story ever told. It is just trying to do what No Man's Land and Nightfall had done, you know, in the years prior. And it's probably the weakest of those Bat family events. But at the same time, man, I really dig this. I can't help but just like it for what it is, and just, again, it's just so fucking dark. Can we talk about surrogates some? Because I love how much that story arc just stands on its own, as this super fucking depressing thing that happens to Batman, and it should really just haunt anybody, and it really doesn't, and I actually kind of find that inspiring. Where, like, they work so hard to save this woman and her baby, and then they give the baby to the grandmother, who's a bad person. It's like, okay, well, you get the first responders and you tell them that we're down here right now. And she gets out, and it's just these silent panels of her in the destruction of this building, and there's no one there, and she just runs off and leaves them. And I'm just like, that's so fucking twisted. And you get a 9-panel grid after that of them trying to keep this woman alive, and she doesn't survive it, and it's just so sad. I really, really like how sad it is. And you kind of, and I promise I'm making a point with this. It's not just look at the sad porn, but like, you see stuff like that, and you think, yeah, how could this guy be anything but a jerk if this shit is happening to him on the regular? Because it's so fucking tragic. I don't know about you. My ability to empathize and treat people kindly is pretty strenuous at best, and I'm not even in the worst set of circumstances. Fuck it, I'd beat the shit out of Mr. Freeze here too. That's kind of where I come from with it. It's like Morrison had talked about it too, where he's like, if you keep doing all these awful things to someone, they're just gonna go crazy. They'll just kill themselves, and I agree with that. And so I kind of just I do look at it in that long game style, Alfie, where it's like, yeah, I mean, he had his whole city collapse around him. He had his back broken. You know, all these other terrible things happened to him around this era. How could he?
One sidekick got killed by the Joker. One got paralyzed.
Yeah, I mean, like, how could he not be a bit of a jerk? I mean, the fact that he's a jerk is, like, commendable almost. It's like, oh man, that Batman guy is such a jerk. Hey man, listen, his whole city got destroyed. He lost, like, a kid. He lost a best friend. You know, they got paralyzed. He had his back broken recently. He's just going through a really rough time. He helped deliver a baby, but then the mother died the other day. It was some pretty dark shit. He's really in for a rough time.
Ian, go ahead.
No, Ruben, you were quiet for a bit. Go ahead.
Ian, I think you would like City of Crime, which is like 12 issues of just really horrible stuff going on and just really bleak. And it just made me depressed for about a week. Batman City of Crime, it's from around the same time period as this. I think you'd like that.
Okay.
Very little supervillains. It's just mostly just air quotes, real world grounded stuff. Just really horrible, awful stuff going on for 12 issues.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna.
Again, there's more sad porn for this.
Yeah,
messages.
yeah, fucking sad porn. Is that a thing already? Can I make that a thing? Can I get?
I think yeah.
Tom King made that a thing.
Oh, damn.
I see what you're saying. I really do. I kind of like. I spent kind of like my biggest problem with this is Batman's characterization.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the narrative, especially of Surrogate, and like the first kind of half of this before we get into the Stephanie, I think is the stronger portion. I think that's fair to say.
Okay.
I enjoyed it more as just narrative.
I mean, it's printed on black paper.
That's your. I was here trying to go into. Maybe we could get into some of like the details of like how does Batman continue with this? It was like, well, black paper, dude. It's so edgy.
I'm just noticing that, like, looking at the spine of the trade, and like the whole first half is just on black paper, and then there's random like issues of it in white paper, and that's exactly where like Green Arrow comes in, and it starts getting more wacky and shit. I'm sorry, I had to throw that out there real quick because
no, I think it deserves it. So yeah, like narratively, just excluding like Batman's character in this, I actually think this is a good Batman story. Like I kind of ragged on this a bit, but I do not regret my purchase of this trade. It's not something I fondly remember as like, this will be in my like top 50 Batman stories, but it's something I can read and think of like, this was the good disposable comic. I'm glad I paid money for this for what I did. I don't regret the purchase. It's not something again, it's probably why when I read this and kind of think, I didn't remember that, because it is kind of, you read it and then a week later you'll forget about it, because although it is so bleak and so dark, the characters we meet in this, like I can't even remember the singer, model, whatever celebrities, I can't remember her name, and I literally just read this like a day ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the idea behind it. I do like this. I feel like the twist, you can kind of see it coming, but I think it works. Just because you see a twist coming doesn't always mean like it fails. I feel like just seeing Batman's relationship like interwove with, I need to do one good act to save this like impossible situation when his pregnant teenager's been shot, and he has to act fast, and he's in like this collapsed building with Leslie Thompkins, and she's this whole time has been trying to like, we need non-violence, we need Bruce, you're kind of tearing yourself apart, what are you gonna, you can't just beat crime into a pulp, there will always be crime, which again, it makes me just more think of him as Punisher, because when I see his Batman's not trying to win by punching crime, he's trying to win by like instilling a message for people of like, you can be a better kind of thing. But here Batman's just kind of like having a problem with this war will just go on forever, and like you say, it'll make him depressed. But the idea of Batman like doing a C-section and having to save this child, and I really do like the moment where they like, he's trying to resuscitate the woman, and then Leslie's like, it's okay, she suffered enough, it's time to let her go. That doesn't mean you're surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's a really nice moment for Batman. I go like that.
Okay. I appreciate the concession. I do really like that. I love that Leslie is trying to, be there for Bruce, and it's like, you got a knack for this. You could be a doctor just like your father. You can save lives in a way that doesn't involve violence. I think that's really interesting, especially knowing where this goes and the kinds of turns that it takes.
Do you guys like Leslie Thompkins?
For me, Leslie Thompkins, like a lot of comic book characters, is a perfectly valid philosophy put to such an extreme that she just becomes a really bad person for being so immovable on said philosophy.
Yes. in this book, this may turn into a rant, but like she's like, well, I despise violence, but thank you for using some violence to save me, Bruce. And then he says, well, I gotta go fight Mr. Freeze. She's like, are you kidding me right now? You're gonna go do some violence? Don't you see what the problem is? And I'm thinking, he's the reason that all this is going on. Like, the whole surrogates thing is happening because of Mr. Freeze and whoever's pulling his strings. And she's just like, refuses to see that. And like, she even tells a story, or someone is like having a flashback about when teenage Bruce saved her life in Africa, which was really weird. Like, she even tells Alfred in that flashback, like, yep, they all respect that this clinic is like a neutral zone, and then like that very night, some soldiers come to like tear the place up, which was weird. But and then she's like, yep, Bruce saved my life, and he had to use violence to do it. I still deplore violence, and I still deplore that he took this path, but you know, he had to do it. So yeah, I wouldn't even say that it's a valid point of view, because I think like whenever she's like, you know, you being Batman is just really dumb, and it's like, okay, but a lot of really horrible stuff would have happened if he wasn't Batman. So like, maybe he's not doing what you want to do, but like, he's saving probably more lives as Batman than he could on the operating table. And like, that to me, yes, she is a horrible person, but like, I don't even think she's got a valid point of view.
I mean, like, I think her philosophy of pacifism is perfectly valid in real life, is what I'm saying. That
fair enough. Yeah,
like I don't think anyone's this much of a pacifist, period, end of story, thank you, goodbye. I don't know, like, how much you gotta piss someone off before they'll throw a punch, but Leslie Thompkins, you could probably, like, you know, slap her in the face while you piss in her breakfast cereal and she'd just say thank you, and it's ridiculous. She is just written in, it's typical comic book writer thing, especially in this era where we've still got some fairly ingrained right-wing philosophy in here, where it's like the man has to take action and save the day kind of thing, and Leslie Thompkins is kind of written as this just over-the-top tree-hugging liberal, that violence is never the solution. It's hard not to look at the politics that are baked into this. This is the era of comics, by the way, that everyone's like, oh, I miss when comics didn't have any politics in them. It's like, no, you didn't notice how ingrained they were. So no, like, Leslie Thompkins' political or philosophical viewpoint of pacifism is fine in real life, but they put her into such outrageous situations in the comics to make Batman look cool and right, and to make her look like an idiot, to the point where she just becomes an awful person who enables violence. Like, there's a story arc, or there's an issue or two in No Man's Land where Leslie has a goddamn field hospital set up for the survivors of No Man's Land. Supplies are limited, like, even basic band-aids are like gold, yada yada yada. And fucking Zaz is just sitting in there on like a bench, and everyone's like, once he wakes up, he's going to kill everybody. You can't keep him here. Well, no. This hospital offers service to everyone, and he needs my help right now. I'm like, this is insane! The guy's like the shark from Jaws. What are you doing? And like, they just like vaguely tie him to a bench. Like, it looked so crude. It looked like no one that knew how to tie a knot worked on the fucking thing. It was so stupid.
I would also like to thank the African soldiers, because if they hadn't come in, then Bruce probably would have watched Alfred and Leslie have sex. And I just want to thank them for that.
That would have been a very different kind of traumatic experience. Yeah, I can see it. Okay, let's talk about the middle story arc that we haven't really gotten into, which is Polished Stone. Okay, so even though I really like Batman comics from this time, I've never actually looked into this. The fuck was going on with Orpheus back then?
I don't know Orpheus from anything other than this story, so I cannot answer that question.
Isn't Orpheus a Justice League villain, or am I mistaking him for something?
That's Prometheus.
Oh, you're right. It's Prometheus. Yes, you're right. Okay. Okay, that's confusing because he's wearing a purple jacket and he's got the helmet and everything.
Yep.
It's just now he's a black guy, and I'm like, wait, what happened here? It's so confusing. Okay, so Orpheus, completely new character, but this kind of like lays the groundwork for what will come. Like this is the beginning of what Stephanie Brown, stumbles into. How'd you guys? What do you guys think of that?
Well, I guess to your question, I'll answer you another question, because I feel like it's different for specifically the reason that Batman brings in Orpheus. How do you kind of feel about Batman, like, making his own gang lords to control crime?
It's so weird and kind of twisted. It reminds me of like this interesting ethical question. So I'm not gonna pad it anymore. I'm gonna give the situation. I want you to give your genuine opinion with no reservations, okay? So there's this kid. He's from a Arabic background, and he's surfing the net on radical Islamic terrorist sites. And he's talking about how he really wants to join and all this stuff. And someone reaches out to him and says, hey, do you want to help me blow up this building in your town? And he replies, yes. And then they meet somewhere, and they, it's a couple of meetings back and forth, and finally they decided on a plan, and they do it. And this kid is under the impression that there is a van parked in a closed building full of explosives, and all he has to do is call a phone number, and the van will blow up and the building will collapse. And he calls the phone number, and on the other end of the line is the FBI. And it was all a massive sting operation. Is that effective police work? Yes or no?
Effective, yes, but jerkish also.
Alfie, what do you think?
There's a stronger word there.
Well, I can give you the law student's perspective. I can give you my moral perspective.
just knee jerk. Is that a good
All
thing
right.
to do or
No,
not?
that is not a good thing to do.
Okay.
Because it doesn't solve any kind of problem. It creates a problem and solves it on itself, and you pat on the back.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's kind of the ethical thing. But a lot of people hear that and they're like, "Yeah, no, that guy was going to do something." Like, maybe, or did you just give him the opportunity to do a thing, right? Like, it's like maybe he just would have been a kid like on the internet for a long time in a dark corner, and you could have just helped him as opposed to putting him in prison. There's like ethical considerations, but a lot of people will hear that and like, oh yeah, no, he was gonna blow up that building, and like, yeah, he was, because you put him in that situation. And so I kind of have a similar thing to that with the Orpheus plan here of like, okay, so what is he letting Orpheus do? Because you see Orpheus's interactions with people, and it's pretty damn direct of like, okay, we don't use guns, we don't sell drugs. And I'm like,
But other than that, they do all the things that gangs do.
Okay, so here's an interesting question. How much do you... Ruben, mute your mic again, I'm sorry. How much do you know about the founding of the Crips?
Nothing.
Okay, this is really interesting chance for some history here. So, the Crips and a number of other gangs, for those that don't know, since we have at least one international guest, the Crips were a gigantic gang, multifaceted, that existed across the United States in the 1990s, or no, 80s and early 90s. Founded by Tukey Williams, among others. But so, like, the Crips were founded to defend neighborhoods that the police refused to go into from other types of crime and exploitation. Now, it got out of hand and clearly became something just wholly criminal. Like, it started, and a lot of gangs start this way, as a way for people to defend their own neighborhoods. and then they tend to try to find ways to finance operations and stuff, and then they get into illegal things, and then people who don't give a fuck about the neighborhood start moving up through the ranks, and it gets complicated. But that's the dumb version of the history of street gangs in America. It is definitely worth looking into more of that. But anyway, I really think it's interesting because if you take drugs and running guns away from street gangs, okay, they collect protection money. There are worse things. We don't get any explicit mentions of prostitution or controlling that market, but at the same time, either way, if it's something they're not doing good, like if it's something that they're like saying no drugs, no guns, and we just forgot to mention prostitution, that's fine. And if they're also controlling it in a way that makes it safe and doesn't exploit people directly or unfairly, I guess, I don't know. The ethics of prostitution are weird. Okay as well. What else do gangs do?
Yeah, and then with the scenes we see of Orpheus, is he's just kind of like, he's almost like, so he's like a mole, but then he's also supposed to do what gang leader things do. And this whole time I'm just left with the question, why isn't he just the resident superhero of that why does he have to be a gang leader? Why can't he just fight the crime like Batman does? Because if that doesn't work, then why doesn't Batman do that for the rest of Gotham? Like, his specific idea of, you will do this specific part, and it's because I'm bad here, but you'll be good here because they actually respect you because you're obviously not a white guy. And I'm just like, okay, yes, but why did he just be the Batman of that place? Why does he have to be a gang lord? Surely that would be your first instance, Bruce. Like, I don't really see like logic here. It doesn't connect to the rest of, not even just my experience with Batman, just how Batman is in the story. It seems so like this was setting up another book that never got made up because it doesn't fit with the rest of it too well.
No, I see that. It is odd and out of place, and I think it maybe is just here to set up the idea of Batman's trying a smaller scale thing of this contingency plan he already put in place. You know?
Yeah.
I think that's the way in which you're meant to read it. I'm not entirely sure. That's kind of what I think might be going on here. And so the ethical argument there is really fucking messy, but I can't deny that trying to get gangs to just not do the incredibly awful shit that they end up doing is probably a more effective method of curbing crime in Gotham than just beating people up. Like, it's totally not intentional, I guarantee it, but like, there's a scene during the whole Wonder Girl story arc where she talks about, oh yeah, we've beaten this particular gang up through like 5 iterations in the last 3 weeks. Like, literally, Batman's method of beating them to a pulp is shown to not be effective. I mean, I don't know, it's weird. It's probably just more there for justification than it is to really even be thought about, but it is there. And so it's interesting to look at in what the War Games story arc is going to revolve around. But you know what else from the mid-2000s that it's really interesting to think about in this regard? Under the Red Hood. Because that's what Jason tries to do. And I just find it really interesting. Again, if you it's not necessarily meant to be, but when you read the continuity as a character arc, War Games and particular War Drums and what Batman was trying to do with Orpheus makes Under the Red Hood a better story than it probably had any right to be. Because you see that Jason was on at least on some level, was on the same kind of thought pattern as Bruce. And that makes the tragedy a little bit more potent.
It's like he's looking at a younger version of himself, like literally.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I can't help but like it for some of that stuff, you know? We did skip the middle story arc, which had I swear it's the only time I've ever read Tarantula in anything. I mentioned her to Steve at one point, and he goes, "Oh, the chick that raped Nightwing," and I don't even want to touch that with a 10-foot pole.
That's literally what I was thinking of when you started to. I was thinking, oh yeah, the chick that raped. Yeah, I've not even read that comic, and that's all I know her for.
Yeah,
I didn't even know there was a DC version. I know there's a Marvel version of called Tarantula, who looks very similar. I didn't know there was a DC version too.
yeah, no, I mean she's an interesting superhero to add to like Bloodhaven and all this stuff, and she kind of comes over to Gotham. I think she's fine in here. It's one of those awkward things that happens when you read comic book crossovers, but I do want to talk about her just a little bit. The merge, one, when the fucking demon man in a trench coat formed out of cockroaches, that was freaky and it was cool. But second, Tarantula, for being a nothing character in the scope of Batman continuity, has, I think, my favorite description of how Batman fights, bar none. Like, you have no idea how much this has informed my interpretation of Batman as a character. So I'm just gonna read this out loud. "This is where I ran into the Batman, and these street thugs threatened to burn this place down. Not such a bad idea if the merge is here. I've never seen a man his size moving so quickly, smoothly, and precisely. The exact length of his reach, the force of his kick, he knows every detail of his body. It's not like dancing or gymnastics or fighting even. It's like math. Remind me never to shoot pool with this guy." I fucking love that shit so much. The idea that Batman fights mathematically is so fucking cool to me. What do you guys think of that? Or was that just like a little nothing moment you read right past?
No, I always,
like it.
because you go ahead, Ruben.
Oh, I was just gonna say I like it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I like it too.
We all like it, because I kind of like go into like, I'm like big into like, I used to be even more big into like superhero versus battles and specifically like street level characters. So whenever you get like a mention of like how Daredevil fights or how Nightwing fights or how Batman fights, like I get really into it. Like I like fight scene choreography. I like the Sherlock Holmes. That's how I always imagine Batman fights, like the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, where he analyzes the fight before he does it, and then like he does the movements, and it's like instant. And that's what he is here. It's like it's math, and I like that specifically for Bruce as Batman, because again, he can fight, but it's all like practiced. It's all going on in his head. It's all cerebral. But then you see like someone like Nightwing, who I probably think, in my opinion, again, is like a better fighter than Bruce, just hand to hand. He's the dancing that she mentions. He's the guy who's in the rhythm of the fight. Whereas like, so no, it's a small moment, but I'm totally with you, and I always dig stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a description of Batman that has stuck with me for the longest time, and I just adore it. Okay.
Earlier you mentioned how this era of Batman is very right wing, and there's a moment in this particular storyline that I probably shouldn't have laughed, but I did. It's when she thinks that she's been infected by this disease that like rots you within hours, or this bacteria. Mm-hmm. And she says, "Aren't you worried?" And he says, "Well, I don't traipse around half naked." And like, I probably shouldn't have laughed, but I did think that was a little funny. Like usually Batman, he doesn't really have much of a sense of humor. Mm-hmm. So I did kind of like, I thought that was a little funny.
You know why that doesn't work?
Why?
Here. Because then he gives fucking Stephanie Brown sleeves.
Yeah, I don't know, that is so weird to me. It's like, I don't trace around half naked. Well, fucking, like, it's not her fault. She didn't actually choose that costume. You know the fucking character designer did that because he had a fucking hard-on while he was drawing the shit. It's just part of what the fuck comics do for female costumes all the time. So what the shit, Batman? You're gonna shit on that? You're a fucking dick. Yeah, it's just it's so fucking stupid. I don't know. It drives me crazy. You know, it's interesting to look back at some of the art from this early 2000s stuff. At like, you know, particularly like Cassandra Cain, Batgirl, who's like, I think the least sexualized superheroine character I've ever seen. She just looks so fucking cool, and like her anatomy is not emphasized in the slightest. Besides just being very apparently female. I just would fucking love to read all the shitty little, you know, comic skaters and stuff complaining about how Cassandra Cain doesn't look sexy enough as Batgirl, and it's blasphemy that she's like a better fighter than Bruce Wayne and all this shit. I would just love to read those comments in this day and age. That is all.
With the stitched mask and everything, and it's funny you mention it because then I have like the opposite thing with Stephanie is where like her boobs are gigantic and like her costume's like got a mini skirt.
She is fucking thick with 2 C's in this. Like... It is ridiculous. The art. Okay. We've avoided the elephant in the room that was drawn by a 2-year-old for as long as we can. And I don't love shitting on people's art or anything because anything I do is garbage. So anything that I see it's just automatically better than what I can do, so I kind of have to respect it. But God, Damian Scott drawing the Robin issues is such a mindfuck of a different art style in here, and it looks so bad. It's not good. I'm just like, I'm looking at like the first issue of when we get it, and it's just like fucking you want to talk about whiplash with Batman changing his mind as to whether or not Stephanie gets to be spoiler or Robin or not work at all. And you just like get to the page of Stephanie running the track. There's not like in my trade, there's not even a cover image in between those. It just shifts to the next chapter like that.
Oh God.
Yeah, and so it's just like, oh God, I've got whiplash. I'm gonna sue Damian Scott for giving me whiplash while reading this trade because it's just, wow, it is not good. It's just wow, and the way he draws Stephanie is just very sexualized. Like no one else is even that sexualized. Like even the girl that is throwing herself at Tim Drake, you know, she's wearing like an exposed midriff shirt and stuff, and she's not even as sexualized as Stephanie Brown is here. It's ridiculous. I'm just flipping through these issues, and I think every woman is wearing a shirt that exposes the midriff. Aren't they cold?
I would make a joke comment that, oh, it's summertime, but no, it's actually wintertime. We actually see a montage where during her training where it like shows snow on the ground outside. So I can't even make a joke comment about that.
Yeah, I'm just flipping through pages, and like Stephanie's mom is the first woman that's not got an exposed midriff. Like, okay, all right, so this is weird. All right, so I'm looking at the pages where Stephanie comes into the Batcave as like in her homemade Robin costume, right? Okay, so she's clearly wearing a belt and a shirt or dress or something that goes below her waistline. And then when she's given permission to be Robin, it becomes a 2-piece clothing just so we can see a ridiculous ass midriff. I'm just flipping through this. It's like, it's so hard not to be super critical. Like I'm looking at the panel now of that bit I read earlier where Batman lays out the rules, and this is the image I tweeted, and I'm just like, it's so bad. Her hair is just like this weird spiky blob. It looks more like a fucking Pokemon than anything else. The art in here, Damian Scott's art for this is just terrible. And I'm being really harsh on the way he's drawing women, but like, you just look over from the panel of him describing the deal to Stephanie, and you look across the page at Alfred's face, And it's really, really awkward and does not look good. Man, what can I say that's positive? I like that he adds Batman's shoulder spikes inconsistently. I miss
Yes.
those. I miss those so
Gives
much.
Cassie them as well.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, and she looks fucking sick with them.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay, he gets some points for that. I'll give him that. It's a little disappointing that Stephanie Brown's time as Robin is just so shitly drawn. I hate to complain that much, but it's just distracting. The difference in
I
art
think
style.
to be on a positive idea, I feel like the biggest problem is it just doesn't fit.
Mhm.
It doesn't fit this story. Like I understand for Robin as a book, I can see this art style working, just because it's supposed to be like the lighter version. Especially if you've got Stephanie Brown as Robin, I can see in the trade I've got, you see there's a very exaggerated cartoon style. I think it's just literally a 3-page story from a 2-cent comic or something. I don't know what cents means. But it's Cassandra Cain and Stephanie Brown, and it's in this chibi style, and it works for it because it's meant to be Stephanie enjoying herself and having fun, a bit away from the dark stuff. But you can't follow that up from locusts and disease that rot people from the inside, and then miscarriages and children that need to be cut out from their dead mother's body.
And then it's sandwiched between that and the fucking serial killer murdering people on the train and shit. You know?
I know. It's pick a time.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the Zaz story? I like the art in there a lot more, and Cassie looks maybe a little too old there, but it works a lot better for me. What do you guys think? I say Cassie. I meant Stephanie. Sorry.
Were you asking what we think of the art, or what we think of just the issue as a whole?
Both.
I actually didn't hate Damien Scott's artwork.
Okay.
I didn't want to chime in, but I kind of like that more cartoony, exaggerated style. So that one kind of worked for me. It is a little jarring when collected in the same book as, I can't remember the other artist's name, but a much more hyper-realistic style. That is jarring, but I like Damien Scott's style, though. But that issue, yeah, it was okay.
Okay. I just like I wish that this had been what she'd been drawn like, because it just looks a lot better to me. It's funny, the gelled up hair is what it's supposed to be. It doesn't look like that to me, but the gelled up hair is just completely abandoned here. So yeah, I don't know. She has completely different hair. I just like this more. It's basically just like Stephanie just jumped into Tim Drake's costume, but it just looks better. I don't know. And the dark shit with Zaz. I don't know. Zaz is one of those characters who probably has no business being a supervillain. He's just like a Law and Order character that got put in a comic book. That's all I got on that.
I think that some of his early stuff in Shadow of the Bat was really good. I think he's a character that has outstayed his welcome. A lot of people are like, "Ooh, he's edgy. He cuts whenever he kills." Okay, I don't think he's that edgy or that interesting, but I think his early appearances were really interesting. But I think that he's been used so much that now I just don't care.
Okay, that's fair. And then we have the final story arc, and we've kind of talked about that one already. But we didn't get much chance to talk about, how did you guys feel reading Stephanie as Robin? Like, just her interactions with Batman and stuff. Alfie, you touched on it a little bit, but how'd she do as Robin?
Well, I mean, we don't really get to see her going against any of the super. Most Robins kind of have a trial of by fire. Tim's turn as Robin and Damien's turn as Robin. I think those are the two best arcs in seeing how a Robin can develop from being recruited into then inheriting the mantle and making it their own. Damien and Tim, I think, both have the most solid stories of that, and I kind of like base everyone else around those two. And Stephanie here, I think it's just due to being so short and knowing how quick it's going to end. We don't get to see her like face off against Two-Face or Mr. Freeze. Or Harvey Dent's not even Two-Face at the moment. But like we don't see her get to face off against any of like the big supervillains. We get a little bit with the Penguin here, but even then it's Penguin's never really like the big villain that tests a character. Like him and Zaz are kind of just like the stock Batman villains when you need a villain for an issue, and you just want you don't there'll be no big grand plan or stakes. It'll just be over one and done. They're kind of like the lower tier in terms of just not character but stakes. You know, Batman's never really going to lose to Zaz. So that kind of idea I think is fine, but I feel like she's enjoying it. She's having fun, which is part of it, because the idea of Robin is, yes, being Batman's partner is something every little kid wants to be. That's what it's created for, because that would be a cool idea. And then as we've gone on to Batman being dark, we started realizing, like, maybe it's kind of fucked up how he keeps bringing these children into his war. And you touch on that a little bit, but I do think her enthusiasm comes through. I do think Stephanie as a character, I wish I got into her head a little. We even get journal entries, but they kind of describe what's going on.
Which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And they don't really get any info into how specifically she's feeling as her story, the way you did with Tim, or even later Damien. You just kind of go along with her and she's enjoying it, and then she has these moments where she snaps, which are interesting, but then they don't get called on. That's my thing with Steffi, is because they're building this arc with her here, and again, they might get paid off later. I don't specifically remember details. I just kind of know, oh, she dies. But I know she's got that Jason thing, which is like a direct callback of where she just doesn't see the end goal. She's like, why don't we just wipe them out? Why don't we just stop it? And the problem will be over. And you think that would be the conflict she has with Bruce. But then it's the disobeying orders thing and like the going off half-cocked. And I'm like, that doesn't feel as narratively compelling to me as what's going on beneath the surface, especially because she's like the daughter of a supervillain. Maybe it's like, is there a way to escape that kind of fate by being Robin, or is that just enabling her to get into those tendencies? Like, I think there's a lot of potential here with Stephanie. I don't think making her Robin was a bad idea. I think it was actually quite a smart one, especially because she was already an established character. But no, I feel like Stephanie's just kind of there, but I would have liked to see it last a bit longer.
Yeah, I think she is a victim of you know, the either the producer or editorial, there's the word, the editorial decision, or, you know, it's hard to really tell where War Games like fits in with stuff, because I've heard various accounts of like, oh, Stephanie Brown being killed in it was like a surprise to everybody except the person that did it, or no, they decided Stephanie Brown was going to be killed the second they decided to go on this direction, and it's hard to tell. I think it would have helped if she were Robin a little bit longer. Like, this trade is it. This is all her Robin appearances. I'm pretty sure the Zaz thing was just a filler issue somewhere, from what I understand.
She does appear in an issue of Teen Titans. She kind of sort of teams up with Superboy, but it lasts less than an issue. Like, it's not even the whole issue, but that's it.
Okay.
And my trade has a Batgirl issue she's in.
Oh, okay, never mind then. My bad. I missed the Batgirl one. Damn. But yeah, like, this is kind of her stay. And then it over. So yeah, I do agree. She should have gotten more time. I think she's shown to be pretty damn effective as Robin. I really appreciate that. You know, like, she gets kidnapped, sure, but like, as you said, Alfie, that's every fucking Robin. That's half of what they're there for, is to get kidnapped.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like, I really like the moment where with the moth villain, the tiger moth. I thought that was kind of a cool little moment to give her. I like the war journals. I wish to God they were written in a more legible text. Whoever did the lettering on that got a little overambitious. But yeah, I don't know. Overall, I quite like what we see her do as Robin, to some degree. Though, and here's my probably my most controversial Batman opinion, Bat Family opinion. The best thing Stephanie Brown ever did was die. Um, so take that how you will, but she's adequate as Robin.
Would you say she's the Batman equivalent of Gwen Stacy, Ian?
No, no, because Gwen Stacy actually matters.
Damn.
No, like I'm not sure if I feel like Stephanie Brown has enough of a character arc that ends badly that you can say she does not get fridged. I've heard people say that they fridge Stephanie Brown in War Games, and we'll talk about that more as it goes on, but I'll say now, I don't think she gets fridged. That being said,
For the layperson who's listening, that refers to Kyle Rayner's girlfriend being stuffed in a refrigerator.
yeah, comic book lingo. I don't think that happens to her. I feel like the way her character ends in this does make sense with what we're shown of her. That being said, I still really don't have much love in my heart for Stephanie Brown. Like, I've made that joke before that the best thing she ever did was die, and Steve's like, no, you gotta understand, you had to read her in Tim's book because of how important she was. And I'm just like, nah, I don't give a fuck about Tim Drake either, so.
See, I liked him because he was Robin when I first started reading, so in my heart, he will always be Robin for me. I like Damian a lot most of the time, but Tim Drake will always be the Robin for me because he was there when I first started. And I do like her relationship with Robin in what I've read of his solo book. It's kind of hard because only just recently did DC start collecting a lot of the stuff of Tim's solo books, because you had like the first like 5 issues of his solo run collected, and then it jumps to like issue 120 something, which is really close to when this was. So there was a huge gap there where there was a lot of stuff that you couldn't read unless you read like Bruce Wayne Murderer or War Games or No Man's Land. But yeah, I like Stephanie as spoiler in the context of Tim Drake's Robin, but I don't care for her as Robin, and I don't really care for her as... I just gotta say, this is really where I think you hit the breaking point of, like, Batman has way too many costumed allies in Gotham.
Definitely.
Do what?
I totally agree with you.
Oh, okay, yeah, because you got Orpheus now, you got Onyx, you got Nightwing, who's more or less just, hightailing it to Gotham every other issue, it seems like. Then you got Oracle and the Birds of Prey. Like, it's just way too much, I think. And I feel like she maybe came in at the wrong time. Like, if they had tried making her Robin, like, a few years earlier, maybe it could have lasted a little longer.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know, like, Again, it's hard not to talk about this and talk about where Batman eventually goes, because as much as I hated that they brought Stephanie Brown back, I really like that she became a member of Batman Inc. I thought that was fantastic, and I thought Batman Inc. was the logical extension of, like DC kept trying to market Batman as a loner, but yet this shit. Like, he's a loner hero, but hey, there's still all this these family members that are really popular characters and they all sell, so let's do an event with all of them. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Y'all, we talked for way longer about this than I thought we would without going into just the entirety of War Games. So I'm actually really excited. So we'll does anyone have anything else they wanted to talk about with this one?
Very small note, but I did think it was hilarious that Tim's friend Bernard was saying that Batman owns all of these orphanages and that's how he gets his Robins. I love it whenever I'm reading a superhero comic and some Joe Schmo who's in the public who doesn't know anything about the private lives of the heroes that we know about, they try to hazard a guess. I always find that amusing. I wish we saw more of that, but I thought that was really funny.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and go on to ratings for War Drums. I'm gonna go last because I'm curious where you guys landed on it. But just before we go into ratings, did I was obviously very positive on this one because I feel someone has to advocate for this shit, even though I know I'm well aware of its many flaws. Did I do anything to sway you guys on this at all?
Not for me. I think it's hard to talk, like you said, it's hard to talk about this without getting into the rest of war games and war crimes. But I feel like when we get to the end of this journey, we're going to look back on this and say that none of these puzzle pieces necessarily fit together, which is pretty important for me. Like this is adding up to, it's building a lot of hype for something, and I'm not sure it's going to stick the landing. And right now, I would just rather read smaller Batman stories, and that's kind of what it's doing. It's doing these 3 little small Batman stories, but they're all part of a larger whole. And so, yeah, for me, it didn't really. Reading it a second time, I still wasn't too impressed with it.
Okay, all right, fair enough. How about you, Alfie? Did I move this up the line for you at all?
Yeah, on specifically one point, which is kind of like me and you, Ian, we have the exact same relationship with reading characters, but yours is with Batman and mine is with Spider-Man, where we just have read so much of it and like so ingrained into like the world and the character. We make this character arc that maybe some other people just can't see. Like I do the exact same thing you're describing here for like 70s to 80s Spider-Man as like a logical character arc, even if I know it's really not. It's like I see it, I read it as that, and it makes those stories better. So you pointing it out to me like directly after Nightfall, like all of this thing, and like this is why Bruce's like idea would be after No Man's Land, after Hush. I understand it a bit more and I can appreciate it a bit more for that, because when I first like read this trade and like when I bought it and I got it, because I was reading backwards, I didn't have that. I just saw, oh, Batman's a dick here, and I don't like this. This isn't my Batman because this is the Batman I see people on Twitter argue for, and I hate that. So
okay,
no, I think you have made me enjoy this from that perspective.
Okay, cool. Yay, me. Okay. Well, Alfie, why don't you start us off with the rating then?
I think I'm gonna put this smack down in the middle. I think it's average. I wouldn't recommend it as your first Batman comic, but if you've read it for a couple of times, if you read Batman and your experience with the world, I don't think it's a bad purchase. I'm gonna put it 2.5 midriffs out of 5.
How about you, Ruben?
I'm going to give this 2 retired Tim Drakes out of 5.
Okay. All right. Retired. Gonna just spend some time with the family.
Yeah.
Have his
Which, by the way,
stepmom make him some
ask...
pizza rolls.
Can I ask a quick question? I know this may derail us, but so when Tim was first introduced, his parents were like very stereotypical, like cartoonishly, like, we're part of the elite, we're wealthy. What happened there? Like his dad looks like a blue collar working Joe in this. Did something happen there, or was that just like the artist decided to give it a different look?
Well, like it's not even that. Like in No Man's Land, part of the reason that like that Lex Luthor is able to move in and everything is because Tim has to go back to Gotham as Robin, and so he has to like tell his dad that he's in Gotham and that he did it on a dare and now he can't get back out. And like fucking Tim's dad raises hell in Washington because he's like this rich influential guy, and that's part of what like lets Lex Luthor get into Gotham and end No Man's Land. And so it's just such a weird thing. Like it's not even like it was, oh, when he was first introduced his dad was rich, but then they just kind of dropped that. Like that was relatively recently by the time you get to War Games.
Okay, yeah. So I
guess he spent all his money? I don't know.
Yeah. So but you guys kind of saw that too, where he seems like he's not the way he used to be portrayed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Maybe he
didn't
had
pick up
health
on that.
problems and all of that, which might like he had a couple of heart attacks. I think maybe that's what led into like losing stuff. But yeah, it's very inconsistent. It seems.
Well, if anyone has an answer for that, if anyone knows what happened to the Drake family fortune, I'll be curious to read the comments on that one. Anyway, my rating. Again, I actually do quite like this, though I am well aware of its many flaws, and I'm well aware that you kind of have to be generous and you have to view it in a very particular way for it to work. So, all that being said, I'll give this 3.5 out of 5. Bat planes that hover. I always like the idea that the bat plane can hover. That's just cool. Anyway, all right, everyone. Next time we'll be back with War Games Act 1. Until then, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm a geek for fun.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we will be discussing things.